The costumes, the hair. There's only one ABBA. And after decades of going their own way, the Swedish...
He wrote the songs that defined a generation. Every melody, every harmony, every unforgettable hook that has ever made a stadium erupt in applause came from his hands. Yet for decades, Benny Andersson hid a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. Behind the glitz of ABBA's golden era, behind the sequins, spotlights, and euphoric audiences, he carried a secret that gnawed at him relentlessly. Alcohol had been his constant companion, the invisible thread weaving through every high, every low, every chart-topping hit. And for years he had concealed it silently, methodically, behind a smile and impeccable musical genius. It was only in 2011, at the age of 64, that Benny finally revealed the reality. He couldn't function without alcohol during ABBA's rise to global superstardom. Every Grammy, every sold-out arena, every euphoric applause, he was drunk through it all. Yet even that confession, raw and haunting, wasn't the most piercing. Benny admitted that the heartbreak-laden lyrics of songs like The Winner Takes It All were not simply about romantic sorrow. They were a shield, a way to navigate life without confronting difficult conversations, a way to pour emotion into music rather than into real life. The weight of that realization, that even the most joyous ABBA hits had shadows behind them, only deepened the reverence for his craft and the sorrow for the man behind it. Benny Andersson's story begins on a winter morning, December 16, 1946, in the Vasastan district of Stockholm. He was born into a household where music was not merely an activity. It was the lifeblood of everyday existence. His father, Gusta, may have been a civil engineer by profession, but in spirit he was a musician, his accordion filling rooms with melodies that lingered long after the notes faded. Even more influential was Benny's grandfather, Ephraim, who commanded the accordion at every family gathering, drawing out traditional Swedish folk songs that echoed through the halls and into the hearts of those present. From the moment Benny could walk, he was enveloped in this world of music. It was never mere background noise. It was a constant breathing presence, a language understood without words. He grew up absorbing rhythms, harmonies, and patterns, storing them deep in his memory. These early years planted seeds that would sprout decades later into global pop phenomena, even if Benny himself could not yet recognize their potential. Everything changed when Benny received his first accordion at the age of 6. To most children, an instrument might spark curiosity for a day or a week before being abandoned. Not for Benny. From the very first note, obsession set in. He joined his father and grandfather for evenings filled with folk melodies, each session stretching long into the night. This was no mere play. It was education, immersive and relentless. Through these family sessions, Benny learned that music could narrate stories, express emotions words could not, and build connections invisible yet undeniable. Waltzes, polskas, schottisches, each rhythm was etched into his very being, forming the foundation of a musical vocabulary that decades later would reverberate in ABBA songs, in ways subtle yet unforgettable. But at 6, he was simply a boy mesmerized by the magic of sound, eager to replicate every note and unwilling to let a single melody escape his grasp. By the age of 10, Benny felt the call to move beyond the accordion. The piano became his new world, a landscape of black and white keys offering infinite possibilities. There were no teachers, no formal instructions, only Benny, the keys, and endless hours of trial and error. He learned by ear, deciphering the notes from songs on the radio and reshaping them into his own interpretations. Rules were irrelevant. Innovation was everything. Day by day he sculpted his own style, blending the structured logic of classical music with the warmth, soul, and improvisational freedom that folk melodies had gifted him. This experimental, self-guided learning gave him an unparalleled versatility, an ability to traverse musical landscapes with ease. This unique hybrid, nurtured in the quiet hours of solitude, would later become ABBA's secret weapon, giving hits like Dancing Queen and Mamma Mia their indelible charm and emotional resonance. At 15, Benny made a choice that would define his future irrevocably. In 1961, he walked away from school, leaving behind the safety of conventional life for the uncertainty of music. For most teenagers, school represented preparation, discipline, and the structure of growing up. For Benny, it represented a cage, something that kept him from chasing the only path he could envision for himself. He began performing in youth clubs across Stockholm, particularly in the suburbs, honing his craft before audiences who might not yet recognize genius but instinctively sensed it. He was still young, still inexperienced, yet already there was an unmistakable intensity in the way he approached music. Each performance was not merely entertainment. It was training, a rehearsal for the grand stages that awaited him. Word of his talent began to circulate. Local bands, producers, and fellow musicians took notice of his skill, his flair, his ability to hold a crowd not through showmanship alone, but through the sheer force of his musicality. In a society that frowned upon those who strayed from conventional paths, Benny was reckless, ambitious, and unstoppable. During these formative years, Benny also experienced the complexities of early love and parenthood. He met Christina Grönvall, a fellow musician, and their connection was swift and undeniable. By the age of 17, Benny was a father to their son, Peter. 2 years later, their daughter Helen was born. While his peers were navigating adolescence and early adulthood, Benny was balancing diapers, late-night rehearsals, and the demands of a burgeoning career. It was grueling, overwhelming, and yet formative. The weight of responsibility forced him to develop emotional depth, resilience, and a keen sense of empathy, traits that would later infuse his songwriting with profound human insight. The love, guilt, and joy of these early years found their way into his music, allowing him to translate personal experience into universal emotion. Everything shifted in October 1964. Benny, still working a day job as a bank clerk, met Svenna Hedlund, lead singer of the popular Swedish band the Hepstars, during an impromptu jam session. Benny's skill on the organ was immediate and electrifying. Within days, he officially joined the band, bringing a rare combination of classical knowledge and raw, instinctive energy. The Hepstars were already riding a wave of popularity, but Benny's presence elevated their sound, adding complexity without sacrificing rhythm or energy. By March 1965, the band performed Cadillac on national television in a program called Drop-In. Over 1 million Swedes tuned in, captivated by Benny's electrifying organ performance and the band's charismatic energy. Suddenly, the quiet, determined teen had transformed into a national icon. Cadillac sold over 80,000 copies, a staggering number in a country dominated by British and American acts. With each note, Benny's reputation grew. He was no longer just a talented musician. He was a force shaping Swedish pop music itself. Not content with performing, Benny began exploring songwriting. His first original composition, No Response, marked the start of a creative journey that would soon change Swedish music forever. By 1966, Sunny Girl became his first major hit, topping charts and selling over 50,000 copies. Its delicate, melancholic undertones captured the uniquely Swedish essence of longing and melancholy, while its universal appeal demonstrated that Swedish pop could resonate far beyond its borders. Between 1964 and 1969, the Hepstars dominated the Swedish music scene, with Benny penning hits such as Wedding, Consolation, She Will Love You, and It's Nice to Be Back. These songs didn't just sell, they became part of the nation's cultural fabric, cementing Benny's status as a musical visionary. By 1967, the Hepstars had sold over 400,000 records, an unprecedented feat in Sweden at the time, and Benny's songwriting genius was at the heart of it all. On June 5, 1966, a fateful encounter occurred that would eventually change global pop music forever. Benny, touring with the Hepstars, met Björn Ulvaeus, 18, who was traveling with the Hootenanny Singers. In a quiet park in Linköping, the two young musicians sat on a bench with their guitars and began casually playing Beatles songs together. What seemed at first an ordinary jam session soon revealed the alchemy of two creative minds in perfect sync. This meeting would mark the beginning of a partnership that ultimately led to the creation of ABBA, one of the most successful pop acts in history. Together, Benny and Björn would sell over 400 million records worldwide, crafting songs that combined infectious melodies with emotional depth, bridging gaps between pop, folk, and classical influences. That same park bench today has been immortalized. Sit there long enough and the strains of ABBA songs play as if the world itself remembers that first magical meeting. The story of Benny Andersson and ABBA begins in earnest as the 1970s dawned, a period of both exhilarating creativity and hidden struggle. After joining forces with Björn Ulvaeus, Benny's compositions gained a new dimension. a fusion of folk sensibilities, classical training, and pop brilliance that the world had never heard before. With Agnetha Fältskog and Anni-Frid Lyngstad completing the quartet, ABBA was born, a band that would redefine pop music and global entertainment. But behind the glittering facade of sequins, dazzling stage lights, and euphoric crowds, Benny's life was far from perfect. Alcohol, which had accompanied him since his early days of teenage stress and parenthood, became both a crutch and a burden. For Benny, the creative high of writing hits, touring the world, and winning awards was inseparable from the numbing fog of intoxication. The contrast between his external success and private turmoil defined the complexity of his life, a man revered by millions, yet quietly tormented by dependency. As ABBA's songs climbed international charts, Benny poured his heart into every composition. Hits like Dancing Queen, Mamma Mia, Take a Chance on Me, and The Winner Takes It All became more than just pop songs. They were vessels for emotion, capturing joy, heartbreak, longing, and triumph in a way that resonated universally. But for Benny, these songs often masked deeper truths. The melodic beauty and lyrical vulnerability hid the fact that writing, performing, and touring were a survival mechanism, a way to channel feelings he could not express openly. While the world celebrated the glittering success, Benny faced his inner demons alone. The fame was intoxicating in more ways than one, and while the applause might have drowned out the anxiety and insecurity, it could never fully erase it. Yet, despite the struggle, Benny's dedication to his craft never wavered. His music became a lifeline, a testament to his genius even in the face of personal hardship. Benny's early fascination with musical storytelling, cultivated through years of playing accordion with his family and experimenting on the piano, became a defining hallmark of ABBA's sound. Songs were meticulously crafted with layers of melody, harmony, and rhythm intertwined in ways that seemed effortless, but were born of decades of disciplined experimentation. Each song carried traces of Swedish folk rhythms, classical influences, and contemporary pop sensibilities, a synthesis that few musicians could achieve. The world heard joyous, singable hits, but beneath the surface lay intricate structures and emotional nuances that spoke to Benny's lifelong dedication to music. His compositions were both personal and universal, reflecting his own experiences while inviting listeners to find their own stories within the music. It was a balance few artists ever master, and Benny achieved it naturally, a result of years spent learning, failing, experimenting, and refining his sound. As ABBA's fame skyrocketed, the pressures of international stardom began to weigh heavily. Touring, recording, interviews, and media scrutiny created a relentless cycle, leaving little space for personal reflection or recovery. Benny's dependency on alcohol, which had been manageable in smaller settings, intensified under the relentless pace of global fame. While colleagues and fans saw a composed, brilliant musician, Benny battled exhaustion, insecurity, and self-doubt behind the scenes. It was a paradox of visibility and isolation, adored by millions yet profoundly alone in facing his struggles. The music, however, remained consistent, vibrant, and emotionally powerful. Benny's ability to channel pain, joy, and human complexity into his work was remarkable, producing songs that have endured decades beyond their initial release. The dynamics within ABBA further shaped Benny's creative journey. Collaborating closely with Björn, Agnetha, and Anni-Frid required emotional intelligence, negotiation, and trust. Benny's melodies often dictated the mood and tone of a song, while Björn's lyrics provided narrative direction. The interplay between melody and story became their hallmark, with Benny's musical intuition translating raw emotion into notes that resonated across cultures. But the collaborative process was not without tension. Creative differences, personal relationships, and the weight of expectation sometimes created friction. Benny's internal reliance on alcohol offered temporary relief from stress, but it also complicated interactions and introduced emotional distance. Despite these challenges, the group's cohesion and shared vision allowed them to maintain artistic excellence, producing albums and performances that remain iconic today. One of the most striking aspects of Benny's journey was the way personal experiences directly influenced ABBA's music. Songs such as The Winner Takes It All were infused with real-life emotional complexity, often inspired by relationships, heartbreak, and unresolved feelings. Benny's honesty in composition, his ability to translate personal struggle into universally relatable music, elevated the songs beyond mere pop. They became narratives of human emotion, capable of eliciting tears, nostalgia, or joy from listeners worldwide. Yet this transparency came at a cost. While fans connected deeply with the music, Benny often had to confront his own vulnerabilities privately, reconciling the emotional intensity of his art with the realities of his personal life. His struggle with alcohol, once a private coping mechanism, was intertwined with his ability to sustain the relentless output required of ABBA's global success. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, ABBA's influence reached unprecedented levels. Albums topped charts in Europe, the Americas, and beyond. Concerts were theatrical events complete with elaborate costumes, choreography, and stage design. Benny's compositions were the backbone of each performance, their complexity and beauty underpinning the visual spectacle. Yet, as public success grew, private pressures mounted. The constant travel, performance obligations, and media attention left Benny increasingly reliant on alcohol to navigate the demands of fame. It was a delicate balance. Alcohol as a crutch allowed him to perform, to create and to maintain outward composure, but it simultaneously deepened the isolation and emotional turbulence he faced in his personal life. Few outside the inner circle could perceive the depth of this struggle, and even Benny himself remained silent for decades, protecting both his image and the perception of ABBA's flawless success. Beyond the challenges of substance reliance, Benny's life was shaped by relationships and personal commitments. The early lessons of young parenthood, love and responsibility remained central to his character. His family, both immediate and extended, provided grounding and inspiration, even amid the whirlwind of fame. Music for Benny was always inseparable from human experience. Joy, sorrow, responsibility, and love infused every note he wrote. The duality of public success and private struggle became a defining tension in his life, influencing not only the content of ABBA's songs, but also the way Benny navigated fame and creativity. Through it all, his dedication to musical excellence never wavered. Each composition reflected careful attention, emotional depth, and an understanding of the human condition, qualities that ensured ABBA's songs would endure long after the era of disco and glitter passed. In 2011, Benny Andersson's candid revelation about his dependence on alcohol brought a new understanding of ABBA's history. Speaking publicly about his struggles for the first time, he offered insight into the personal cost of global fame. The revelation was both shocking and deeply humanizing, a reminder that even the most celebrated artists carry private burdens unseen by the adoring public. Benny's honesty illuminated the relationship between his art and his life. The music that inspired millions was forged not only from talent and discipline, but also from vulnerability, struggle, and resilience. By acknowledging his dependence, Benny completed a long arc of personal honesty, giving fans and historians a more nuanced understanding of the man behind the music. Even at 78, Benny continues to reflect on the journey that carried him from a music-filled childhood in Stockholm to the global stages of fame with ABBA. The melodies, harmonies, and rhythms that once resonated only within the walls of his home now echo worldwide, immortalized in timeless pop classics. His life story, marked by early genius, personal struggle, creative triumph, and eventual candor, serves as a testament to human complexity and the transformative power of music. Each note he wrote, each song he composed, carried fragments of experience, memory, and emotion, allowing listeners across generations to connect with both his art and his humanity. The truth, finally revealed, does not diminish his achievements. If anything, it enriches them, offering insight into the resilience, talent, and vulnerability that shaped ABBA's enduring legacy. Today, as Benny Andersson reflects on his life, one sees the culmination of decades of artistry, struggle, and perseverance. He is a man who turned private pain into universal music, who transformed personal demons into global joy, and who, despite the shadows of addiction and personal challenges, created a body of work that continues to inspire, uplift, and connect millions of people. The ABBA songs that once dominated airwaves and filled arenas are more than entertainment. They are a chronicle of a life lived fully, intensely, and honestly, even when honesty took decades to be spoken aloud. Benny Andersson's journey reminds us that behind every song, every melody, and every triumph, there is a human story. Complex, imperfect, and profoundly moving. At 78, Benny Andersson stands not only as a legend of pop music but also as a testament to the endurance of creativity and the courage to confront one's own truths. The glittering sequins of ABBA's costumes may fade, the roar of the audience may quiet, but the music, and the story behind it, remains eternal. Benny's revelation, long anticipated yet boldly understated, confirms what many suspected and few knew. The man behind the music is as human, as fragile, and as extraordinary as the songs he gave the world. The melodies, once created in the privacy of a Stockholm home and later performed on global stages, now carry the weight of lived experience, triumphs, struggles, and ultimate honesty, offering not just entertainment, but profound insight into the life of one of history's greatest musical visionaries. After ABBA's meteoric rise and the glittering years of fame, life for Benny Andersson took on a quieter yet no less profound rhythm. The band officially disbanded in 1982, leaving a void that could not be filled by applause or accolades. For years, the world had known him as part of a four-member phenomenon, a man behind timeless melodies that had defined a generation. Yet in the silence after the spotlight dimmed, Benny faced an unfamiliar challenge, reconciling the extraordinary achievements of the past with the realities of a new chapter in life. Fame, after all, is a double-edged sword. The exhilaration of stadiums chanting in unison, the glittering sequins of ABBA costumes, the ceaseless press coverage, all of it faded into memory. What remained was Benny Andersson, the musician, the father, the man, tasked with redefining purpose without the constant validation of global superstardom. Transitioning into life after ABBA was not merely a professional adjustment, it was deeply personal. Benny delved into projects that allowed him to explore new musical horizons while reflecting on his own journey. Collaborations with longtime partner Björn Ulvaeus continued, but the creative focus shifted toward ambitious endeavors, such as the stage musical Chess, which opened in London in 1986. Unlike pop hits designed for radio airplay, Chess demanded narrative sophistication, thematic cohesion, and intricate composition. Benny embraced the challenge, drawing on decades of musical experience from Swedish folk rhythms to classical influences, to craft something that spoke to both the mind and the heart. The project was not without obstacles. The critical reception was mixed at first, production challenges loomed large, and the pressure of living up to ABBA's legacy weighed heavily. Yet Benny's commitment to artistry remained unwavering. In each note, each motif, he sought to preserve the emotional honesty that had always defined his work. Musical evolution in this period also allowed Benny to experiment with genres and ideas that would have been unconventional for ABBA. He explored complex harmonies, layered instrumentation, and narrative-driven compositions that drew on European classical traditions as well as contemporary sensibilities. This exploration was both a liberation and a test of endurance. Whereas ABBA's songs thrived on immediacy and melodic accessibility, Benny's post-ABBA work demanded patience, reflection, and a different kind of emotional investment. Collaborating with Björn and other musicians, he pushed boundaries while maintaining the integrity of melody and storytelling that had always been his hallmark. The process was painstaking yet exhilarating, revealing that Benny's genius was not confined to pop music. It was a lifelong pursuit of sonic expression, continually evolving, refining, and reaching for something greater. While his professional life flourished in new ways, Benny's personal life remained equally complex. Fatherhood and family continued to anchor him, offering both joy and grounding. His children, Peter and Helen, had grown into young adults, yet the early lessons of responsibility, love, and sacrifice continued to influence him. Fame, with all its trappings, never completely subsided, and navigating public attention alongside private obligations required balance. Benny's relationship with alcohol, a companion from his youth and a private struggle for decades, remained a poignant part of this era. By now, reflection had begun to temper indulgence, offering insight into patterns that had shaped both his successes and his challenges. Interviews and personal accounts reveal a man who had learned to navigate fame, creative pressure, and personal vulnerability with humility and determination, even if the shadows of the past lingered in quiet moments. The legacy of ABBA, of course, remained omnipresent. Long after the final curtain of the original band era, Benny's music continued to resonate across generations and continents. The musicals and solo projects were one dimension of this influence. But the cultural impact of ABBA's catalog was another. Songs that had become part of the global lexicon, instantly recognizable and universally loved. Benny Andersson's ability to blend intricate musicality with emotional accessibility meant that each composition retained depth while remaining approachable. The melodies that once reverberated in Stockholm, London, and New York now echoed across film soundtracks, theatrical productions, and countless covers by new artists inspired by his work. ABBA's music had transcended time, proving that Benny's genius was not just in crafting hits but in creating art that spoke to the human experience, universally and eternal.